So as you know, arrays are a series of key value pairs. In our first two lessons, we introduced two scalar variable types. Those were strings and numbers. And in today's discussion, we are talking about another type of a variable, which is called array. Unlike strings and numbers, an array can hold multiple separate pieces of information. An array is therefore like a list of values, each value being a string or a number or even another array. So arrays are structured as a series of key value pairs where one pair is an item or element of that array. So for each item in the list, there is a key associated with it. Now PHP supports like two kinds of arrays, indexed, which use numbers as the keys, and associative, which use strings as keys. Okay, so here are the two types of arrays. As we said, an array is a list of key value pairs. So the first type of array where the key is some kind of value, the key is a number, and then associated with it is a value. So you see 0, and then there's a string, right? 1. Okay, so this is also we may call it as index. So index 0 has this string, index 1 of the array has this another string, index 2 has this string. Okay, so there goes the first type of array where the numbers are used as keys. And then comes the other type of array where the keys are also strings. So we call these like associative arrays. So these type of arrays, the first type of array is very common in other programming languages as well. So if you know about like C or Java, you know that arrays they have like index that is denoted by a number, and then a value associated with that again is that index. But this is something new which is in PHP, where the key might be a string itself and the value is also another string. Okay, so the first array, we call it, these arrays, as you know, any variable in PHP starts with the $sign. So these arrays, the name of these array is artist, and here the name of this array is states. Okay, so next, so any array follows the same naming rule as the other variable, as you know, right? So we said like the first array's name is artist, the second array's name is states. But if you want to, so the artist array actually contains all these values, right? It contains all these values. And the states array actually contains all these 5 pair of values. Okay, so if you want to refer to a specific value of an array, you have to start with the array variable name followed by the key within the bracket. So here, as you see, we had like 2 arrays, right? So if we say like artist, then inside the bracket, if we mention 2, that means it represents this string. Similarly, if I say suppose states, and then in the bracket I put IL, that means I am denoting this Illinois thing. Okay, so if I print something like this, echo artist2, it will print Wilco. If I print something like this, echo states and then MD, then it will print Maryland. Now, one thing to remember is if I am using the second type of array, which is called the associative array, in that case, the key that is also a string has to be put into the single quotation mark. Okay. Then inside if you want to print an array inside a string context, this is how you have to do it. Okay. So this is similar like any other variable, but if you want to print a associative array, then remember you cannot do this. It's not going to work. What you have to do is you have to put the whole thing inside a curly brace. This is something that you need to remember. Okay, so for associative array, you just cannot uh, print it within a context, string context, uh, like any other variable. You have to put it inside the curly brace. Okay. Now, although we didn't talk about arrays first, we just introduced array, but already we have come across arrays and also use them. So as you know, arrays are is a list of key value pairs, right? So we already know about some super global arrays. Like we already talked about $_get, $_post, $_request, right? If you remember from that there. So if you remember that from let's go to our examples. So you see in the examples here, right? We had this. So we had this form, right? So from this form, we had different fields: name, email, gender, age, right? And when the data was sent to the script, now the script could access the values by this, like request, right? So basically, everything was now here. So this is, you can think this is, so the script actually gets all the values inside an array. The name of the array is request, and the keys were the name of the fields. So request name, request email, request comment, request age, request gender, request submit, right? So we can say that this request thing is actually built in super global array, and super global is because this is built in, and this array is actually the name of the array is fixed, either $_request, $_post, $_get, and the keys are depend on the name of the fields in the HTML form. Okay, so yeah, so we are familiar with this type of arrays. Next, we'll also get like we will get acquainted with some other types of super global arrays in the later part of the course. Those were like server array, session array, cookie array, right? So $_get variable is where variables is where PHP stores all the values sent to PHP script via get method, right? $_post array stores all the data sent to a PHP script from an HTML form that uses the post method. And as you know, we discussed in the previous lecture that $_get, $_post, $_cookie are subsets of $_request. Okay. Okay. Next, let's see one of the examples here. So if I go here, let's say this handle form one. Okay. So here, as you see, so this is just a simple example. Like how we are actually using a super global array. So this is um, a PHP script, and once the form submits the value, right, the form has these fields: name, email, gender, right, age. These fields are accessed. So since the method is post, once you click on the submit button on the form, then this form, handle form, can access all the values in $_post variable, right? And the keys are going to be uh, according to the name of those fields. So you see everything is now inside, everything is accessible through the post array, and using the name of the fields we can access the individual elements. Okay, so this specifically checks if any of these fields are empty, then it will say please go back and fill out the form again. Otherwise it will print something. So if none of them are empty, then it will print something. Otherwise it will say please go back and fill out the form again. Okay. Okay, so next, let's go back to our slide. Okay, so how do we create arrays? So we know that so far we have talked about the super global arrays, and we know how the super global arrays are populated. Once you submit the form, now based on the form submission method, and um, based on the form submission method and the name of the form control fields, right? Form control elements. Uh, the super global arrays are uh, they're initiated. So now, if I want to create my own arrays, not the super global arrays, how do I do that? So there are multiple ways to do that. One is you declare your array and then you keep on adding elements. So suppose here is one example. You create an array band and then you keep on assigning values to it. So assign you one value, two value, three value. So what's going to happen is basically under the hood, uh, this is, yeah, under the hood, this is happening. It's actually here. Sorry. So once you do this, basically this is what's happening. So in the index 0, the value that you are storing is this. In index 1, the value being stored is Brett. So if you print $band1, it will print Brett for you. Similarly, if you print $band2, it will print Murray for you. Okay, so that's the first way of building arrays. So you just keep on assigning values and the index will be updated automatically or increased automatically. The other way is you can just specify the key directly and put the value, and that's another way you can create arrays. So you can just say like artist5, or you can just say $band. So if I do this, suppose if I do this $band 0 equals to something like this, suppose Mehrab. So what's going to happen is already $band 0 had these values Gmain. So this will be overwritten by Mehrab. So after this fourth line, $band 0 is going to have Mehrab, 1 is going to have Brett, and 2 is going to have Murray. Okay. Okay, so Yeah, the example that I said, if you specify a key that already exists, the new value will override the existing value. The example just that I showed you, that's that's the same thing that's mentioned here. Okay, so the another way of creating array is using array function. So this is one example for that. So suppose you have you declare an array named states, and then you use this array function, and inside it you have key value pairs. So you see this is the key, this is the value, this is the key, this is the value. So you separate them using comma, and so this one will now create uh, an array of two elements. For the first one, you can access it using dollar states IA, and the second one is dollar states MD. And the first one has the value Iowa, and the second one has the Maryland. The function can be used whether or not you explicitly set the key. So here in this first example, I just set the key and value, right? Again, the key and then the value. But otherwise, I could just do this. Suppose you see this. So here is an array I declare. Uh, here is an array named artists. Then I use this array function, right? And inside that we have like three values. So what's going to happen is now if I say artists, if I print something like this, artist one, then it's going to print this shins. Okay, because the reason is because since I have used this without mentioning the explicitly setting the key, it will start from 0 and then keep on increasing. Okay. And then what you can do is if you set the first numeric key value, the added values will be keyed incrementally. So if you declare something like this, $days equals to array, then for the first one, you mention the key and the value, but for the next ones, you don't mention the key. So what's going to happen is automatically this one will get 2 and this one will get 3. Okay, so this is another example that if you explicitly start with any value, then the array will actually start from that value, which is not actually possible in some of the languages. In some of the languages, you have to start from 0, right? This is built in. But in PHP, you can start from any value and then it will increment from there. Okay, so next is accessing the array. Obviously, we have already seen how to access the array. You just mention the array name, and then inside the bracket, you mention the key. Okay, so this is how we had accessed the email address, right? Once we sent the data from the form to the PHP script using the post method, dollar underscore post email now had the value for the email address. Now, as you know, the array has like may have multiple elements, right? As you know, that array is a list of key value pairs. So if you want to access all the elements of an array, what you can do is you can use this for each loop. Okay, so for what this does is suppose you have a array named value, right? So you say like for each uh, sorry, the array named array. So what you do is for each array as value, do something with value. So in the first loop, value is going to be like array 0, and then in the second loop, second iteration, it will be value will have the value of array 1, etc. Or if you do this, what's going to happen is you are going to access only the value. But if you want to access both keys and values, so you have to do this using the for each function. You in the argument you put it like this: dollar array as key to value. In that case, you will get both the key and the value. Okay, so okay, let me show you one example. I think an example would be really helpful. Okay, so let's go and check this one. So script in this folder 0206. Here you see this is a PHP script, right? Inside the body we have this PHP block. So we have declared an array here, months, dollar month, and then we just put the values like this. And for the first value, we mention the key. So we mention the key here. So obviously the keys are going to be incremented. So okay, so before I come here, let's do another thing. Let me show you another function that also creates arrays. So this is the range function, the PHP built-in function range. So what it does is if you use this function and you mention the lowest element and the highest element here, what it's going to do is it's going to create an array for you. So the name of the array is going to be 10, and 10 0 is going to be 1. So the values are going to be between 1 to 10. Okay, and similarly, if the range has the characters A to Z, so you are basically creating an array called alphabet, and where alphabet 0 is going to be A, alphabet uh, 1 is going to be B, etc. Okay, so if I go here, you see we are using this range function. So days, we are creating an array days and also another array years, where we are in both cases we are using the range function. Okay, so as we said, we can access the array using the for each function, and there are different ways to do that. So let's see. uh, as the first way, uh, we are using this months array, right, as key value. So once we do this, what's going to happen is the key is going to be the 1 and the value is going to be January. Next, in the next iteration, key is going to be 2 and the value is going to be February. Okay, so we are just so what we are doing here is, you see, we are not printing it, rather here we are actually creating a drop down. If you very carefully notice this, select is a drop down element, and echo, using the echo function, we can send HTML elements to HTML browser, right? So the browser will say, oh, okay, I have to create a drop down menu, and inside the drop down, okay, so we have created a drop down menu. So this is the starting element and this is the closing element. Inside that, we are running a for each loop, and here we are adding one element at a time to the drop down list, where the value of the element is the key, and the text that you see there is the value. Okay, so that is the first way of using for each. Or what you can do is, the next way is also you create another drop down. So let's actually see this. For the next one, we are actually not uh, accessing the elements using the key value. We are just using the value. So you see the values are going to be 1 to 31, right? So the first option is going to be 1, the second option is going to be 2, 3, up to 31. And next, for the years, right? The years, the lowest range is 2017, the highest is 2027. So basically, we are creating another drop down, and then we are running a for loop for this array, and then we are adding one option at a time. So we are adding 2017, then 18, then 19, etc. So if I go to my let's go to my example. So yeah, this was the file calendar.php. Okay, so here you see we had created 3 drop downs, right? Using the for each loop and using this months array as key value pairs, we kept on adding the elements. So each element was, and the value was value 1, and we just put the text here. And then we created another for each loop where we kept adding the options from 1 to 31, right? And then the third one, we kept adding the values from 2017 to 2027, which comes from the year. So this is months array, the days array, and the years array. So using the for each loop 3 times, we actually keep on populating the drop downs. So one thing I'm telling you that when you are actually looking at this lecture, just pause and look at this file and try to understand how this is working. This is very important, and I hope just by going through this file and example, you can just secure some points in your exam. Okay, so next, let's go back to our slide. Okay, so this is using the range, we can create sequential range. We can create arrays which have values of sequential range. We just saw an example where it's useful. Creating month array, creating day array and year array. Okay, so this is the same example, actually almost the same example that I just showed you, creating months array, days array, years array, and then creating using 3 for each loops, we actually populate 3 drop downs. Okay, so if you want to determine the number of elements in an array, you can use this function count. So an array's key can be multiple worded strings, such as first name and phone number. So multiple worded means you not necessarily, the whole key doesn't need to be just a single word. It can have like multiple word or a string itself. And then like if I want to check if an element is an array, is array function is going to be handy. And finally, if you see an invalid argument supplied for each error message, that means you are trying to use for each loop on a variable that is not an array. So for each loop is only works on an array element. Okay. Okay, so next let's talk about another thing, multi-dimensional array. So when we were talking about arrays at the beginning, we said arrays are a list of key value pairs where the values can be strings, they can be numbers, and we said even the values can be arrays themselves. Okay, So that is really interesting, right? How it can be an array itself. So let me show you this example. So let's say let's copy this. Yeah, so let's copy it here. Sorry. Okay. I'm actually showing you a multi-dimensional array. Okay, so let's say call USA. The value itself can be also an array. So this is how it works. So USA can have like list of strings, Washington, CA, Texas, Arkansas, was it Alaska? Probably Arkansas is this, right? Forgot. Okay, New York. So you see this is itself is also an array. So key, and then let's put another key, Canada, and the values can be another array. So for the Canada, I think the provinces in Canada, that is British Columbia, Ontario. I don't know if they use 2 letters for Canadian provinces. Alberta, I don't know what Alberta is, but Saskatchewan, whatever, right? Okay, so you see here, this is also an array, and the difference here is, here the key is a string, that is fine. The value is an actually, let's delete this. Okay, anyways, just forget it. Forget it. Okay, so just what I wanted to tell you is this is an example of a multi-dimensional array where the key, you have an array, that is you have a list, but the key is a string, that is fine, but the value itself is another array. Okay, so let's go back to our slide of multi-dimensional array. So an array consisting of other arrays creates a multi-dimensional array. So here is it. Suppose you have an array prime and you create it using the array function, and then you create another array sphenix. You also create it using a array function. Now you declare an array numbers where you use the array functions, and then you use this just a key, any key, primes, and as a value you put, okay, it should be not primes, just prime. So you see this is, selecting is very difficult. Okay, so this is actually this one. Similarly, this one is actually this. Okay, so we have actually put 2 keys, and again is as the values we have put 2 arrays. Okay, and then if you want to print this, now what you have to do is, if you just say dollar numbers and then prime, you are just mentioning the key, right? But that key has a, as value has a lot of elements, because as value it has an array in it. So you have to put another one. So if you, another index 0, so this one will actually print 2 for you. Okay, so let's go and look at one example. So let's look at this example. This is an example of a multi-dimensional array. So you see the first array is declared here, Mexico. So the key is the abbreviation for the Mexican province, or do they call it a state? I think province. And then, so this is, I can't spell correctly, Yucatan, something like this. This is Baja California, and this is Oaxaca. Then, so we have our first array. This is an associative array, obviously. Then we have our second array, US, where the key is the state indicator letters, and the value is the full name of the state. Then we have another array, the third array, Canada. Okay, so we have created these three arrays. Now we are going to create a multi-dimensional array. So you see, I'm creating a multi-dimensional array, North America, where I have three keys. That is fine, Mexico, United States, and Canada. But for the values, I put the arrays themselves. So you see, this whole thing is the value here. Similarly, this whole thing is the value here. Now I want to print all of them. The way I do it is I use the for each loop, obviously, and then North America, as I define it as key value. Okay, so the key I know is Mexico, that is fine, but the value is an array itself, right? So the list. Then, so what I have to do is, if I want to further break it down, I have to use another for loop, right? Because this list is going to be an array itself. So this is an array itself. I further break it down into key and value, and then print it, key value. Okay, so what's going to happen is, in the first iteration, Mexico is going to be selected as key, and Mexico array is going to be selected as list. Then I print Mexico, that is here at the beginning, and I run a for each loop on Mexico array, where it prints the key and value. So the key is going to be this, value is going to be this, key is going to be this, value is going to be this, key is this, value is this. So I am going to print Mexico and then this thing. Okay. Okay. Now in the second iteration, the country, the key is going to be United States. So I'm going to print United States, and the value is going to be this US array. So I'm going to print this whole thing here in the second for loop. Okay. So let's see how actually this looks like. Obviously, this should look like the way I described. Yeah. So you see Mexico, and then we created an unordered list actually. So this is how this gets printed. Again, this is something to be noted. I suggest everyone to understand this program as well, how actually everything is getting printed. Okay. Okay, so next. So we talked about multidimensional arrays. Now, arrays and strings, PHP has like two functions to convert between arrays and strings. Suppose you have a string, this, and then you have a separator. So if you mention the separator and use explode function, what's going to happen is this string is going to use this separator to, and it's kind of like what the name suggests, explode into an array. For example, this is your string, okay? So the string is this part, Monday to Friday. And then as separator, you say like this hyphen. So this S1 has the value Monday to Friday, and then you mention the explode hyphen as the separator, and using the explode function, now what's going to happen is days array is going to have, this is going to be an array of 5 elements, where Monday index at 0, Tuesday is index at 1, etc. Friday is going to be indexed at 4. Similarly, if you have an array and then you use a joiner like or glue and then use implode, then this whole array is going to be converted to a string. So first, using the explode, I actually created this array, and then I use that array, and using this glue I make it a string again. So you see s2 is going to be a string like this. Okay, finally, sorting the array. So there are built-in functions to sort the array. You can sort the arrays by value, just disregarding the original key. So suppose names is an array, and if you call sort names, it will sort the names based on their like topological order. Okay, so the first one is going to be Curly, then Larry, and then Mo. Another way to sort is sorting an array by value and maintaining the key. So the key is going to be maintained. So what happens here is once you sort it, the keys are going to be changed. What are the keys here? The keys for Mo, the key is 0. For Larry, the key is 1. For Curly, the key is 2, right? So, but once you sort it, now the keys are going to be, so Curly is going to be now new key 0. Mo is going to be key 1. Sorry, Larry is going to be key 1, and Mo is going to be key 2. So the keys are no longer there, like they're reassigned. But if you use a sort, now you still are sorting by values, but the keys still remain the same. So the keys are not going to be reassigned. Or you can sort an array by key using the k sort. Now AR sort is the reverse of a sort, and kr sort is the reverse of k sort. Okay, so let me show you one example of sorting arrays. Okay, so here, okay, so here you see there is an array, movies. It's a key value pair. And then first what we do is we just print the movies with the title and rating. Okay. And then we actually print the rating and the title. After that, what we do is we do a k sort on the movies, and then we print it again. And then we do a sort on the movies array, and then we print it again. So let's see how it looks like. Okay, so initially we just print the array in their original order, right? We print the rating first, and so basically we're actually creating a table here. If you see, like this is, we're creating rows. Okay, anyways, so after that what we do is we do a k sort. We know that k sort is based on their key, right? This was the key, right? So this was the key. So Casablanca, Donnie Darko goes second, obviously D, and then S, then T, right? But after doing the k sort, one thing to remember is you see the the keys are still intact. So, sorry, the values are still intact. So the keys actually are still associated with their values. And after that, we do a sort. So a sort is actually based on the values, not the keys. So you see there now this sort is done using based on the key. And so this is the ascending in ascending order. But if I want to do it in descending order, I have to do air sort. Okay. Yes. So I want to show you another thing. So let's do this. Let's say just do a sort. Okay. Okay, as you know, if I do sort, what's going to happen is this is going to be sorted based on the values, but the keys are going to change. Okay, the keys are going to change. So let's see this. Let's see what happens if I do this. So I am printing it again, but now I have done a sort. So here's the thing, the key for English patient, these are the keys: English patient, Story of Weeping Camel, Donnie Darko, Stranger Than Fiction, right? And these are the values. Now I have done an A sort. So once I do the A sort, the sorting is going to be done on, okay, done on the value. Actually, the value is already sorted. So probably this is not going to work. Let's do this here when it wasn't sorted at all, the beginning. Okay. So here we see originally these were the keys and these are the values. So now if I sort, still the keys are going to be the same, but it's going to be sorted on the values. So let's see what happens. Oh, okay. I see. So this sort is done just based on the values, right? You see, just based on the values. The values are 2, 5, 7, 9, 10, 10. But what's going to happen is the keys are no longer remaining intact. So they are assigned new keys. That was what we also talked in the slides. So you see, we didn't, if you do sort, it sorts based on the value only, but it doesn't maintain the key. That's important. Okay. So we saw one example here that if I just use the sort function, it's going to be sorted based on the value. That's fine. So this part was the value, the first column, right? But the keys are not maintained anymore. And you see that example here. Okay. Okay, so next talk about the while loop. So we already have talked about one of the loops, that is for each loop, and the for each loop is used to loop through the elements of an array, right? Okay, so the while loop, this is the actually last language construct we'll discuss in this chapter, is two ways to do the loop. So another two ways. So already we have learned about the for each thing, right? Next, let's talk about the while thing. So it's simple. So while the condition remains true, you do something. And you get out of the loop once the condition becomes false. And then the for loop, is like the format for the for loop is you have a for and then an initial expression, condition, and closing expression, and then you do something. Here is the one example. So you say like for you declare a variable I. Initial condition expression is you start with the value of 1, and then the closing expression is you the condition is the value of I is until it's less than equals to 10. You just print the value and then you keep on increasing it. Okay, so let's look at this example. Okay, so here you see we have a for loop here. So what we do is it's the same like the one of the examples that we showed. So this like this example here, we had created the days and years array using this range function. Instead of that, what we can do is we can use a for loop. We initiate it with value 1, and then we add a value. We add an option to the drop down. Next, we increase the value of day to 2. So this is how it works. So initialization, then it checks the condition. If the condition is true, then it does something. Then it goes here, increases the value, checks the condition again. If it's still the condition is true, it does something. Then it goes here, increases the value or decreases the value again, checks the condition, and does something again. Okay, so it keeps on from 1, it keeps on increasing until it reaches 31. Similarly, here it starts from 2017, it keeps on increasing until it touches 2027, and in between it keeps on adding option to the drop down. Okay, so it will actually show you the same thing. If I go here, so this one, right, calendar.php. Yeah, so this time this one is created using the for each function. This is created using a for loop, not for each function. This is created using for each loop. This is created using for loop. This is created using another for loop. Okay, so there is the ending of our chapter 2, and there goes our discussion on. So we talked about arrays. I showed you examples on arrays. We then talked about uh, loop, how to actually loop through arrays. We talked about how to sort arrays, different ways to create arrays, and finally we talked about the while loop and the for loop. For better understanding, I suggest you check the textbook, and obviously, this is something you have no way to avoid. What you have to do is you have to go through the examples that I showed you, make changes there, run the examples to to understand comprehensively what has been discussed. Okay, and best of